This is Muriro on Monday on Star FM. Muriro on Monday. Brace yourself. It's a hard hat area.
Star FM sounding good all the time. Good evening and thank you for making us your number one. It is 18 minutes before 7 o'clock. I am Linda Muriro, and as always on a day and time as this, we discuss issues to take Zimbabwe forward. Now, Zimbabwe is hosting a SADC extraordinary summit of heads of state and government, which began yesterday and ends on Wednesday. The country is hosting the summit in its capacity as chair of the regional bloc. The gathering brings together heads of state and government from the Southern African Development Community to address pressing regional issues. The summit's agenda prioritizes peace and security, focusing on the SADC mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo, whose mandate is set to expire year-end. Recent political developments and elections in the region will also take center stage during the summit. Now, the 4-day summit comprises various technical meetings, including the meeting of senior officials of the Ministerial Committee of the Organ on Politics, Defense and Security Cooperation, Standing Committee of Senior Officials and Finance Committee, as well as the Council of Ministers. The sessions lay the groundwork for the Heads of State Extraordinary Summit, facilitating collaborative discussions among member states. Now, our discussion panel will examine the implications of the summit's outcomes on regional stability, economic cooperation, as well as future prospects for SADC member states. Stay with us.
This is Muriro on Monday on Star FM. Muriro on Monday. Brace yourself. It's a hard hat area.
And I'm joined in studio by political and international relations analyst Goodson Guni, as well as Dr. Abigail Mpambi and Lazarus Sauti. Gentlemen, good evening and welcome to the show.
Good evening.
Thank you very much.
And Dr. Abigail Mpambi, I'm loving the sound of that. Congratulations are in order. We didn't have that doctor title the last time you were on the show. Tell us more briefly about that.
Well, I think it's quite new, even in my ears. But I'm just grateful that, of course, one international academic institution, saw it fit to confer such. And, of course, with a focus to my usual work, my 20-year journey in advocacy work.
Congratulations indeed, Dr. Abigail Mpambi. And as always, it's good to have you on the show. To begin with, as always, we value the contributions of you, our listeners. Do take part in this discussion via our studio WhatsApp number 0772162651, 0714414413. And after the news at 7 o'clock now, Indaba, I will be opening the phone lines. Now, to begin with, Goodson, in August, Zimbabwe hosted the 44th SADC Summit of Heads of State and Government, where it assumed chairmanship of the regional bloc. Can you briefly take us through what the extraordinary SADC Summit happening now, which is done outside the main SADC Summit, is all about?
Well, first of all, the extraordinary summit is taking place to address issues of development, to address issues of peace and security for the Southern Africa region. And you can see from the turnout that many African countries in Southern Africa think it's necessary for people to get together. You must remember, SADC is there to make sure they help the people of Southern Africa have a better life. And I'm glad that 3 months after our president became the chairman of SADC, there is an extraordinary summit here to deal with issues in Mozambique and in DRC.
All right, thank you. And Dr. Mpambi, the theme promoting innovation to unlock opportunities for sustained economic growth and development towards an industrialized SADC. What is the significance of that theme in your view?
Well, we thank you so very much. You'd appreciate that we have got our strategic focus, the Agenda 2015 to 2063 for the region. And this theme remains significant at a time when we want to bring forth the link or the inseparable link between development and peace. Yes, SADC is focusing on issues of industrialization, regional cooperation, and we have got the unfolding, disturbing, continuous issues rising from the DRC. We also have on the agenda the issue of the protests, disturbing protests in Mozambique, notwithstanding the fact that we had, of course, the Cabo Delgado still trying to settle. So it's an injure one, injure all concept. We cannot talk about sustainable development when part of our region is affected. And you'd realize that the theme remains critical, but an extraordinary summit is coming in to respond to the immediate issues that needs, of course, immediate attention. And it's called for. This is the reason why the bloc was formed, so that it gives prompt response to issues that matter, to issues, of course, that needs regional attention. If you see, if we are going to have a DRC process like that, surely we are having an influx of refugees in Zambia. What does that mean? We are going to have issues of influx of the same, maybe coming down here. And of course, we cannot talk of stability as a region. So I think it's an issue of trying to bring forth the link, of course, between development and peace itself.
Right, and Lazarus, looking at the timing of this extraordinary summit, is it necessary and justifiable?
Let's take it from this angle. The purpose of the SADC regional bloc is to promote peace, security, and development in Southern Africa. And as mentioned earlier, the region is suffering from post-electoral crisis in Mozambique, and the March 23 movement, M23, in Democratic Republic of Congo is wreaking havoc, and most people in DRC are suffering. They are now more vulnerable to diseases. Remember, when it comes to issues of community security, that is internal displacements that are occurring in Democratic Republic of Congo, what it simply means is the human security is at loggerheads, and mostly people are suffering. So the timing is very, very important, because human security is key, and what we really need in Southern Africa is development, and this development is anchored on peace and security. Issues to do with human lives are sacrosanct and should be treated as such, and leaders in Southern Africa should be commended for taking such a bold decision to convene in Harare and deal with issues that are affecting ordinary citizens.
And Goodson, to what extent will, in your view, the extraordinary SADC summit address these challenges, the threat to peace in countries such as Mozambique and DRC? To what extent does the SADC summit, the extraordinary summit, can it address these issues?
Well, the summit will address the issues very differently from a lot of people, because there are people who are revolutionaries who are among the heads of state, like our president is. He understands geopolitical arrangements which the Americans are promoting in the region. For example, in the DRC, the fight for resources is what's causing that civil war there. And in Mozambique, it is also the fight for resources. And more importantly, post-election violence and protests is something that is being promoted by some embassies from the Western countries in the region. That wherever there is an election, and a party that the West does not like, then they finance and promote demonstrations. But they are not really, they don't affect the people of Southern Africa, because they understand very clearly that there is an election, somebody must win, somebody must lose. And in Mozambique, Frelimo won. And the party that the West wanted lost, so they are funding and financing electoral post-election violence. So just like they did it here, when the party that they formed didn't win the elections, they were funding and financing violence. And that is why there are agents in Southern Africa, represented by people like Job Sikala and Nelson Chamisa and a host of other agents of imperialism. They are the ones who think that SADC should be a body that supervises what happens here and aids regime change. So I'm very sure the summit is very clear, because they have information that some of the conflicts that we have here are aided by anti-African forces and their agents locally. So they will have put their brains together and sort it out for us.
Abigail, some analysts or sections have described SADC as a toothless regional grouping. What do you make of such assertions?
Well, as we stand here, we actually have a SADC mission in DRC, a response to the state of DRC, which was deployed in 2023, 15 December. That's action. As we are here talking, we are having another response to the outgoing and prolonged conflict in DRC, where we are even expecting that part of the resolutions possibly can extend the SADC mission in DRC, so to make sure that the lives of the people, the vulnerable, the children, the women are, of course, preserved. That's action. So I think, of course, you may agree with SADC, you may agree with revolutionary parties or not, but the truth is that action generally has been taken, of course, to make sure that this bloc remains relatively, if not even the most intact one. We have been seeing all these things happening even in North Africa, Central Africa. This is actually a chaotic, artificial chaos that we all know that it is being fueled as, of course, a move by the West. We know very well what we are suffering from as Africans. Colonization was, of course, their interest. At one point, we were the menu. Now that we regained political independence, neocolonialism is at play. There are so many forces that are at play. Appreciating that background, you would understand how robust of course, SADC has tried to maintain this region intact. And by such responses, we must be actually grateful that at this point we still have our region intact. And of course, there's no region that doesn't have its own challenges. Go internationally, we've got the Russo-Ukraine war, we have got the conflict, of course, wars in Israel, and by the so-called, even actually funded by the so-called lecturers of democracy. So I think as a bloc, SADC should just go back to basics and say, why did we, of course, funded the formation of SADC itself? It was about peace.
Lazarus, I'll bring you in and rephrase the question. Some critics saying that SADC is fast losing its relevance, attacking it for its soft stance, seemingly soft stance during a political crisis in member states. What do you make of that?
It's all about diplomacy, respecting countries' sovereignty, especially when it comes to dealing with internal strife and crisis within member states. So when it comes to SADC, remember the purpose in life is to promote peace, to promote human security, and not to trigger conflict. So SADC leaders are doing their best, especially when it comes to uniting members of the region, promoting social cohesion within and across the region, as well as stimulating socio-economic development. The argument that the regional bloc is a group of friends who are toothless when it comes to dealing with problems that are affecting the region. I think it depends with who is defining and shaping the narratives. When it comes to defining and shaping developmental narratives within and across member states in Southern Africa, what is key is to locate the human being, to locate citizens of Southern Africa. Those people need food, they need peace, they need jobs, they need clean water, and most countries are trying to provide such, even though challenges are there, here and there in certain countries. So it is naive to say SADC is fast losing its relevance. We have also to locate the developmental trajectory that countries are taking, and we have to commend leaders for doing a fantastic job with that regard.
All right, it is 3 minutes before we get into Now Indaba, and you are tuned to Star FM, sounding good all the time. I am Linda Muriro, and tonight we are discussing the SADC Extraordinary Summit of Heads of State and Government, which is taking place in Zimbabwe. And do come through with your contributions on 0772 162 651, 0714 414 413. And after the news, I will be opening the phone lines. I have in studio political analysts Abigail Mpambi, Lazarus Sauti, and Goodson Guni. And Goodson, I will ask you that very same question before we take our news break. The relevance, is SADC still relevant?
SADC is very relevant for the people who are patriotic to Africa, who love Africa. As far as the agents of Western countries who are in our countries, SADC is not relevant because they think that SADC should help them to win elections. That's not what SADC was created for. And the people of each individual country must have their own destiny. They must be sovereign. And unfortunately for us, the Western countries, and there is a South African body that is run by the DA that is busy attempting to buy African countries in Southern Africa to change governments and change the system of governance. And we are going to protect SADC because it's our baby. We started it. We are founder members of SADC. And I think that SADC is doing a perfect job. And we are going to resist any pressure from the West to turn our body against ourselves.
All right, and this is the conversation we're having, and I can see your messages coming through, and I will be reading those. I am Linda Muriro, and we continue our discussion where we are zooming in on the SADC Extraordinary Summit of Heads of State and Government, which is currently underway in Harare. And what you need to know, it was prompted by the situation in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo, the DRC, and the post-election tensions in Mozambique. Now, President Emmerson Mnangagwa, who is the SADC chairperson, will chair the summit and will receive update reports on the progress of the SADC mission in the DRC. Now, SADC deployed its mission in the DRC on the 15th of December last year on a one-year mandate as a regional response to address the security situation in that country and restore peace, security, and stability to pave the way for sustainable development. And what you may need to know around what is happening in the DRC, the country is experiencing one of the world's humanitarian crises, where the Congolese army and its allies are fighting numerous rebel groups, including the March 23 movement, M23, for control of territory in the eastern part. And the fighting appears to have intensified, resulting in mass casualties and displacement. And the violence is characterized by the deliberate targeting of civilians, schools, hospitals, and displacement camps. And this is what we are discussing, the SADC Extraordinary Summit taking place in Zimbabwe. And my guests in studio, I have three political analysts, Abigail Mpambi, Goodson Guni, as well as Lazarus Sauti. And do continue with your messages on our studio WhatsApp number, and the phone lines are open. I will take calls as they come through. 0772 162 651, 0714 414 413. Now, Abigail, the SADC summit, all these developments are happening at a time where we have seen opposition parties taking control of winning elections, sweeping to power. Talk about Zambia, Malawi, Botswana, and Mauritius, while the former liberation movement in South Africa, the ANC, was forced into a power-sharing deal. What does this mean to SADC?
Thank you so very much. SADC itself exists to promote good governance, and this includes, of course, facilitating or overseeing that we have democratic elections, and this includes the processes that we are seeing happening. There is nothing wrong, primarily, if the people of SADC or from any member states may choose to change, probably to rotate their leaders. It starts from council, it starts from MPs, and even, of course, in terms of the very ruling parties. What is causing a distortion is when there is another hidden hand behind the regime change. That becomes an issue. So for as long as the change comes from within, of course, the interests and the voices of member states, the citizens of SADC, that is not a problem. It can never be the problem even with the revolutionary parties, because that's what they fought for. But then, if we have the neo-colonial hands coming in, it means he who, of course, funds, he who, of course, supports such from behind would then, of course, call the shots. At the end of the day, we may lose the very same independence if we are not careful. So I see a conflict that is emanating from the principles of SADC, of course, the founding members, the principles of the body itself, to make sure that they consolidate the gains of the liberation struggles that were fought across the region. So the coming in of the opposition movements should surely and solely be coming from the citizens. Once there is a foreign hand, a conflict starts. So definitely there is democracy that will be at play, but the very same democracy must be having an element of Afrocentrism. That is the voice and the neutral voices of the citizens of SADC, the citizens of member states. Once it is distorted, then the whole thing becomes a problem with the tenets of the liberation movements, which then founded the SADC, so that people are not taken back to colonialism. They are not taken back to what they fought for, and of course paying the prices that we all know, the sacred price of fighting, and of course paying with their own blood.
All
so
right,
I think that's the whole issue.
Some calls here. Star FM, good evening. Star FM, hello.
Hi, Linda. Good evening.
Good evening. Yes, you're through to the program. Go ahead with your contribution.
Okay. So my question is from the points that these guys are raising there in studio. So it clearly shows that SADC is only there to, for political side, not economical or any other side. So can they please tell us the truth? If the SADC is only there for political powers, not economical or any other sectors, because we are hearing them telling us about patriotic, about with elections and so forth. So they're only focused on political side, right? Am I right there?
All right, I'll allow them to respond to your question, but thank you very much for that contribution. I will give them time to respond. Let's take some more calls. Star Famila. All right. So the numbers to phone in on are 0772162651, 0714414413, and I have in studio some political analysts in here. Star Famila. All right. Okay. All right. So yes, you can come through. But Goodson, you'd like to respond to that last caller?
Well, thank you very much. I just want to say that many people in Zimbabwe don't see any difference between Zimbabwe, Botswana, and Zambia. There is a huge difference. The way we attained our independence is a very important thing. Here in Zimbabwe, we have a president who witnessed the worst things of the Rhodesian and colonial rule. Himself nearly was killed, hanged, for fighting for freedom. We have people who witnessed the massacre of thousands of people in Mozambique and Zambia by the Rhodesian security forces. And the people of this country lost thousands of their sons and daughters. People in Zambia didn't die like that. People in Botswana didn't die like that. In Swaziland, they didn't die like that. In Lesotho, they didn't die like that. Now, in the case of Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Namibia, and Angola, there was a deadly civil war that was fought, where white supremacy was fought, and the black people in those countries attained independence. Now, that is because of that, it's very difficult to get us to accept a neo-colonialistic arrangement in our countries. And we are very much aware that in those countries where there was no war of liberation, neo-colonial forces are very busy. They are setting up political parties. They are funding political parties. You know that in Zimbabwe, because we are in Zimbabwe, we can only talk about Zimbabwe. In this country, the Western countries are very unhappy with what we did with the land resettlement program. They didn't like the way, and yet the main thing that we went to war for was for the land. And because of that, they set up opposition parties. Now, those opposition parties that don't want to represent the people of this country, but want to represent American and British interests in our country, they will find a lot of opposition. And they will find it difficult to win an election here, because the people of this country are very much aware who the CCC, MDC represent. They certainly don't represent black Zimbabweans. They represent white commercial farmers, and because of that, they will be resisted. And the leadership in SADC right now, they will resist machinations by the West to, and I'm not suggesting for one moment that the elections in Namibia have anything to do with, in Botswana have anything to do with neo-colonial forces.
But the president responding to the question from the caller, Goodson, is SADC fulfilling its mandate as far as its objectives are concerned, which are to achieve economic development, peace and security and growth, alleviating poverty and enhancing the standard and quality of lives of the people of Southern Africa, as the last question, the last caller asked, or it's a political body that is self-serving, and what some critics have said.
It's a political body that's self-serving for those people who want regime change. SADC as a union and as a unit of people, they have economic problems that they are sorting out for the region. They are discussing inter-country trading arrangements. They are doing all sorts of things. But I suspect the last caller was more interested in the issue of regime change. And they think that because SADC countries are not aiding the regime change by agents of imperialism, that's why there's something wrong with SADC.
Lazarus, I'll bring you in. To what extent has SADC achieved the objectives of promoting economic development, growth, alleviating poverty, and enhancing the quality of lives of its citizenry?
Okay, thank you. So let me try to fit in the caller's shoes and unpack his question. Is SADC there for political reasons only? The answer is no. Why? Because if you check the theme of this year's summit, the 44th edition was on industrialization, innovation. It was also on value addition. And when it comes to the theme, what is key is the promotion of regional integration. But to what extent then is discursive? Why discursive? Because if you check, Zimbabwe is promoting regional integration. I'm picking it from the Second Republic's mantra, Zimbabwe is open for business. What it means is the Second Republic is encouraging other countries, investors in Southern Africa to come and play a part in the developmental trajectory of this country. And South Africa is also on some developmental projects that are stimulating development within the country. The same can also be said about Botswana. But we are facing our challenges. We are blessed with natural resources, but most people are not benefiting from the natural resources, hence the theme industrialization and value addition. So the caller maybe is expecting SADC countries to really invest in value addition, mineral beneficiation, so as to lift the lives of ordinary citizens from abject poverty. As I said before, it is all about human security. Political leaders in Southern Africa should, as their priority, promote human security provisions, food security, employment creation, community security, personal security, the promotion of civil and political liberties within the region. And if they can manage to effectively do that, then we can say the Southern African region is now on a trajectory that is people-oriented.
All right, let's take some more calls. Star FM, good evening.
Yes, Linda, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. You're through to the program. You can go ahead.
Dave, this is my name.
All right, thank you very much.
Right, I'm a bit worried about there's this earlier question which the last caller asked you, and it's a bit disturbing that Mr. Nguni, with all due respect, he tried to evade the question. Instead of answering the question, in my opinion, he ended up spreading propaganda in terms of trying to say Zambia, Botswana, and other countries did not fought a proper war. The war that he actually thinks the Zimbabwe did. To me, that was not necessary. Because the question was very clear. Is the SADC a tool which was actually meant for political reason only, or it's all about economic and so on and so forth? That was a simple question. I don't know why he ended up elaborating. In my opinion, he ended up... In fact, if other leaders from these other countries, in my opinion, have heard what his explanation was all about, I think that was quite necessary. So, thanks to the other panelists who actually tried to answer the question. And I think in case of, let's not just try to be political in everything. We want to hear answers that are constructive, that build a nation. I think this rhetorics, Zimbabwe, let's try to do away with some of these rhetorics. That's my contribution.
All right. Thank you very much for that contribution. Abigail, you'd like to come in, just weigh in your thoughts on what the callers have said.
Well, thank you so very much. I want to come probably a little bit looking at both sides. I don't want, I don't buy in a narrative of trying to divorce politics to development. Looking at the ubiquity of politics itself, it is what defines who gets what, when, and how. So, surely these were liberation movements, political movements, who of course needed probably to front and say, how are we going to foster economic development, social development, regional cooperation? Of course, we are seeing this happening. That does not mean that we don't have our own share of challenges as a region. In terms of trade itself, we have got treaties that promote trade. We don't have visas, even as we are trading across and even visiting. Those are deliberate systems that are put in place. Issues of innovation, ICT. Right now, soon after the 44th SADC Summit, I was personally impressed by the construction companies in this country. They are already convening all the regional construction companies in SADC in Victoria Falls just next week, actually in the footsteps of implementing the outcomes. So I think we need, of course, to have a citizenry being able to define what SADC is. SADC is you. Outside politics, you must be able to engage and plug in. But I think I have a feeling that most of the listeners or most of the citizens divorce themselves from the definition of SADC, and they'll be saying, what have they done? The next question is, what are you doing? What are we doing together? Because this is policy. We need to connect and implement.
All right, let's take some more calls. Star FM, good evening.
Linda, good evening.
Good evening, yes. So you're through to the program. You can go ahead with your contribution.
Thank you so much. Ndinongotaratisha pamusoro pemapanelist edu kuti ukaona tiri vana vanyamuno tiri maZimbabweans, ukaona munina wako ane muonero wakasiyana newako, uchimutumidza zita rakashata nokuti aona maonero akasiyana newe, pane problem newe. And opposition party aireve kuti enemy inenge ine maonero ainawo ruri party inofana kutora mugarisana sevanhu vanyamuno totaura development yeZimbabwe, kwete kutaura zokuti nokuti takairwira nyika ino kwakafiwa maninji tichitaura zvedevelopment. Ngatitaure development kuti vana veZimbabwe vabenefite vese. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that contribution. Let's take some more calls. 0772 162 651, 0714 414413. I have in studio political analysts Abigail Mpambi, Goodson Guni, as well as Lazarus Sauti, as we look at the SADC Extraordinary Summit of Heads of State and Government currently underway in Zimbabwe. Star FM, you are tuned to Star FM. Good evening.
Good evening, Linda. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. You can go ahead.
All right. So I think importance of SADC consider these days, it has to do more with politics. So one panelist Arumomo sound like some oppositions are now divorcing themselves from cooperating with others. But what then happened is kuti imingana muri mumba uyoworo wanumwe mwana then wonotaura kuna baba hakupi iye. So you then feel like you're not part of the family. That's why uchizoona vamwe vanhu vachizongo wane that resentment yekuti whatever is happening here is for them. But if you see my founders at this SADC, the aim goal was for unity, fine, on the political front, because politics, my board of directors, SADC, so to speak. So, but in this day and era, could power a proper cooperation. If we were to look even my pillars, FDI, they come from issue here, political stability. It has to do with the respect of rule of law, so that kana ku Zambia, ku South Africa, ku Zimbabwe, kune rule of law, kana kune stability. Cooperation is able, we can now be able to cooperate. But there should be a railway line inongotakura goods from Mozambique yakananga ku Zambia. Ukatasa ku DRC ndo kunoproduce more than 60% yemvura. Kune source yemvura. But you could see a drought. We should not be cooperating in such things. But okay, fine. So unnecessary these resources, specialization. Okay, Mozambique, Botswana, Chita, Mombe, Zimbabwe, Chirimai, Chibage. Then we cooperate as a region. But it then stems from having uniform from the political front, from our currency and everything. But as it stands, SADC ilikungowani kwa chete pakungoti ingobatsire kuti ma liberation movement angorambe arimo. And then wachipemera kuti opposition yeneo liberalization pauda kudzoka mufunga kuti opposition ikawina nhasi munomu ndezvipi zvawangachinja zvisingadiwi nemaZimbabweans wangadzosera land kuvarungu isine constitution. What is it that matter even wakawinwa nemaopposition in other countries? Ndezvipi zvawakarivhesa zvekunyatsa kuti zviri pachena kuti chionai maopposition aya akudzosera nyika kuvarungu? It's absolutely nothing. Hogwash, that's propaganda yekukipa power kuti vanhu vakwanise kukontinya vachiluta.
Aiwa, tinotenda chaizvo. Chiregai titore vamwe vateereri tigopa zvakare mukana wekuti vadare vedu vange vachipindura zvemataura. Star FM, good evening. All right. Lazarus, I would like you to respond to the concerns or the contributions that have come through. The last caller saying SADC has failed to promote regional integration. Tirikuona pasati pane kujigidzana nekunyatso batidzana panyika dziri muSADC pakuvandudza upfumi, asi msati mapindura ndikuona nhare dzacho dzakuwanda rikainditrai kutora. And I will ask my callers to be straight to the point and precise so that we can accommodate as many callers as possible. You are tuned to Star FM. Good evening, or you're through to Star FM rather. Hello and welcome.
Ndanzwa mukuru vachitaura nezve neocolonialism, but I want him to answer 3 questions. 1, who's in charge of the countries in charge, particularly Zimbabwe? Number 2, who is flourishing nekuda kwesystem yatinayo? Number 3, who is suffering for system yatinayo? Is it the ex-farmers or is it in charge of this somebody?
All right. Yeah, Murkuti system deipi, we suffering from which system, sorry?
Okay. Takatora nyika from these colonialists, but tirikuyedza kuiprotect from neo-colonialists at the expense of our people. This is no picture yatiri kuona, because it is tiri kutambudzika even after tatora power from vatiri kuti maneo-colonialists.
Aiwa, tinotenda chaizvo tanzwisisa. Regai ndibotora umwateereri Star FM, and I will ask my panelists to take note of the contributions as they come through. And do remember to lower the volume of your radio. You are through to Star FM. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. Then chiti awana Goodson ngune warungoti neo-colonialism and so on. Even for example, I'm an independent thinker. And when my thinking is differing from that of Goodson Nkune and so-called revolutionaries, it's regarded as we are being a puppet. But I've never met a colonialist in my life. It's my independent thinking. Do they have evidence? When people are demanding a new way of governance, it's being sponsored by neo-colonialists. Do they have the evidence? Who are the neo-colonialists? What have they done? Some of these claims are even illegal, where you are saying agent of neo-colonialism, or is that a claim? Is that a claim to protect your positions in government?
All right, I will ask Goodson to respond. Nekuti ndofunga vateereri vakati they are responding to comments that you made. Goodson, would you like to address these contributions that are coming through from the listeners?
Yes, I'd like to. I just wanted people to understand. You'll never hear of a Zambian opposition leader going to America or Britain to attack the Zambian government. You'll never hear a South African going to Britain and America to attack their government in South Africa. You'll never hear a Botswana or a Mozambican. You only hear Zimbabwean politicians going to the West to attack their own governments. The promoters of sanctions against Zimbabwe that has led to the death and suffering of Zimbabweans, closure of industries, were Zimbabwean politicians who wanted to use sanctions to remove ZANU-PF from power, to create a dysfunctional relationship between the people and ZANU-PF. That is what the Americans have said is the reason why they have got sanctions against us here. So it's different, and we are right to think that is neo-colonialism.
Abigail, you'd like to weigh in your thoughts in response to the contributions as well as Lazarus before I take my next round of calls? What do you make of these sentiments that are coming through? Kuti sei tisinga kwanisi kugamuchira kusiyana kwepfungwa mafungiro nemaonero ezvinhu, kuti why are we quick to throw names, accuse when people have a different way of thinking? Takutova label kuti ndeve regime change, vakazodai ndofunga ndozvabuda mune vateereri. Are they justified, or where are we getting it wrong in terms of polarization iyoyi yekuti we are divided divided over even issues of national interest. I think recently Tangatiri mu issue sanctions, where we were commemorating the SADC again, Anti-Sanctions Day. We had a discussion here. Zimbabweans are divided over the issue of sanctions. Where are we getting it wrong in terms of speaking from one voice or seeing issues from the same book? Or should we? Is it supposed to be that way? You'd like to respond to that?
Yes, thank you so very much. What is crucial is to note that indeed even our own constitution allows people to think or to accept people to think different, even to join your own political party of choice, even to represent, even to lead. But I think this is in terms of Section 67 of our own constitution. But then we have got what I think is careless leaders. Particularly, I'll tell you this, in the opposition. Myself having a background also from the opposition. I think we've called careless leaders. The reference of sanctions being a neo-colonial weapon is on record, being requested by the opposition. Let the people suffer so that they will do A, B, C, D. So automatically we have removed the independence, neutrality of people actually deciding what they want. So the coming in of these sanctions then becomes an issue, an element that is now assisting another wing. So at the end of the day, we no longer have the very level playing field. At the end of the day, you see why then the ruling would definitely justify why they are saying, no, we fought for this. We can't just let it go just like that because of some dollars and cents. There are a number of occasions that we've had careless, of course, availments, even from external forces. There is no guarantor that when you bring neo-colonials or opposition in government, things are going to be okay. We have got cases across the river. We know what is happening. So all we want to fight for is the supremacy of the constitution. We need the voice of Zimbabweans, neutral voices, of course, to say whatever they want. But as long there is a third hand, this is what is bringing all this confusion and commotion. So it's not normal.
And before I move to Lazarus, is this peculiar to Zimbabwe, Abigail, where we, as you say, having opposition parties trying to promote regime change, or is it a phenomenon that is cross-experienced in other parts of SADC?
Of course, it's not Zimbabwe is not the only one affected, but the principle of sovereignty, the principle of self-determination, the principle of standing in for what you believe in, our foreign policy, our domestic policy actually equips those in power to make sure that they actually minimize such, if possible, block the interference, foreign interference. So you must understand that whilst we've got democracy, we've got sovereignty, we've got issues of territorial integrity, and that is why the president has to take under oath to say, I will protect.
So again, I ask, what is the impact then of having opposition parties ascending to power, Goodson?
Well, I tell you what, the problem that we have here, and we must say it, there are two countries in Africa where the opposition parties go to the West all the time for financial assistance and support. The Democratic Alliance in South Africa and the CCC in this country. Now, you can't expect us to respect those politicians taking part in our democracy when they themselves were saying, let Zimbabweans suffer so that they can not vote for ZANU-PF but vote for us. That kind of democracy, we cannot accept it. In America, you would never be allowed in America to come into office if you wanted to work with foreigners. There's a special law that stops that called the Logan Act. And I think the time has come for us to have it here. The Patriot Act is very much it's too late. They must have it now, right now, so that we control what Zimbabweans can do with our own politics. We can't allow a politician who says Zimbabweans must suffer first, invite sanctions on us, on this country, close our factories down, stop us getting aid from the IMF and World Bank so that they can come to power. We can't accept that.
All right. And Lazarus, I will rephrase that question I asked earlier on following that contribution from our listener. Can SADC member states effectively integrate despite the different economic and social development levels, the widespread poverty, low productivity, and persistent conflicts that we've seen? Is it possible to effectively integrate?
Okay, thanks, Linda. So let me push back and say the challenges that post-colonial Africa is facing stem from the issue that we are a product of violence. We inherited violence, and we are using we are monopolizing violence to acquire power, to consolidate power, and alternative voices are not given the much needed space. And by alternative voices, I'm talking about civil society organizations. I'm talking about the issues to do with the opposition political parties. And the reason is because of the love-hate relationship between the post-colon and those spaces. So when it comes now to promoting economic stability, regional integration, peace and security, as Abigail said, we have challenges of the principle of sovereignty. The principle of sovereignty is very clear. Countries have to control what is happening within their territories, and they should not interfere. So I can give a very clear example. Suppose Mozambique. Mozambique is burning. Mozambique is suffering from post-election crisis right now, but it's difficult for most SADC countries now to discuss issues that are happening in Mozambique freely without the approval of the Mozambican government. So what we really need to do is to deal with such impasses, such obstacles that are not promoting free debate, that are not promoting the public sphere, to discuss about political issues affecting other countries. Let's also try to revisit the responsibility to protect principle in Southern Africa. We should have big brothers who can protect the rights of citizens in other countries, but to what extent? Because Ndopa issues to do with interference. So this question is not as simple as it appears to our listeners, because a lot of politics behind this and issues that should be dealt with first before that Dilane regional integration, before that Dilane industrialization.
All right. Okay, let's take some more calls. Star FM, good evening.
Hello.
Hello, yes, you're through to Star FM.
Thank you very much. I think some panelists are being too defensive. Issues at the end now.
All right, we seem to have a poor connection. I'm going to have to drop that line. Star FM, good evening.
Yes, Linda.
Makasimba ere. Mapinda mchirongwa taura zvenyu.
I think senyika instead of focusing nekutara jargon na political neocolonialism chichima sanctions. Ngatimboita chirwira ngatimbodzinge maChina paradzira nyika.
Aiwa, panguva dzino izvi toda kumbotaura nezve SADC Extraordinary Summit. Iyo topic yemakutaura handiyo yatiri kutaura mukati mezuva ranhasi. Star FM, good evening. Star FM, hello?
Hello, yes.
Yes, you're through to the program.
Yes, thanks a lot, Linda. Just a trima Zimbabwe. Ukunzwa another girl. They think that they monopolize the course of discussion. Can I tell a nation? Say we want the best for Zimbabwe. But nyama sanctions yabagutaurwe inova yaitwa kunge ndiyo chete. We remember a few months ago, Tagaona Permanent Secretary, I thought sanctions have been removed, now we can move on forward. But they use it at every turn. Panempa kanganisika zvinhu kuti vati to blindside us so that we come to believe kuti everything has been caused because of sanctions.
They can be removed. Asi achipoka hanzvadzi pari zvino.
Achiripo, you remember there was this farmer, a ZANU-PF farmer, a long way back. He said that we have everything that we need in Zimbabwe, but we're just not doing enough ourselves. There are things that we could do with or without sanctions, and we have not done those things. We are working with the Chinese. The Chinese are helping us to build Wange Power Thermal Station, but we do not have even a third of what we need in Zimbabwe. Those are things we could do without sanctions, because the Chinese have nothing to do with it. But we are not just doing anything. And then Kanatataza, from the time we looked east, we have nothing to show for it. And that countries who looked east after the former president looked east, they are doing way more than us.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for that contribution. I'll take my last caller for this round. Star FM.
Hello, Linda.
Taswera o mapina mchirongwa taure zvinyi.
Panyaya dzekumozambique chaidzo dzekutaurwa totoni mamwe Zimbabwe vatogotera kumozambique achigotera freedom saka kungarigere kuita nyanga nehondo.
All right. So ndichambo kubatai muromo nekuti this is hearsay and pano pachirongwa tinenge tichida kudila nema facts zvinobatika, but I will allow Abigail firstly to respond to my concerns or the contributions that have come through. Zvakawanda zvacho zvichita kunge zvinyunyuto ndisati ndadzokera kuna Goodson. What do you make of the contributions that are coming from our listeners? Mumwe ari kuti zvoni following Zimbabwe's Look East policy, what are the gains zvinobatika? Maybe you could like to take us through what the wins have been for Zimbabwe following its Look East policy. Of course, we've seen the Second Republic adopting its engagement and re-engagement drive, where it's saying it's a friend to all and enemy to none. But how would you like to respond to these contributions that have come through, Abigail?
Well, thank you so very much. I don't think it's true that it's only sanctions that are being talked about. We have seen, like the way you already highlighting, we have seen in the past 5 years or so massive infrastructure revamp in this country that anyone can see. We have seen a lot of development across the board. The issue, even that we are talking of industrialization of SADC, ICT, beneficiation, innovation hubs in institutions of higher learning. For me, I think we are going, of course, in the right direction. Of course, when we begin to talk of sanctions, we see an issue of rise of emotions, because the center of issues of sanctions is a political wind with their political interests. This is why when we mention sanctions, we see emotions rising. Exactly what we need to deal with. Of course, the president has been talking clearly condemning issues around corruption. Of course, we have seen people being, of course, taken as far as to jail because of this subject. A lot still needs to be done together as a people. So it's only that I want to repeat. Why we are having sanctions, we want to mention issues that matter. We see a rise of emotions. It's because this is the issue in the House. We need to demystify this so that we can approach even our own elections, even our own governance issues independently as Zimbabweans. Whatever Zimbabweans choose is not a problem. But the problem is when we have a hand, someone being assisted. This is what is bringing in the distortions. And I think basically those are issues coming on board. And I want to say the people on the ground are innocent of this. Let them not catch emotions. Some of these decisions are led by their own leaders, by our own leaders. So let the people calm a little bit and let's approach this subject objectively.
All right, indeed, we do say that a comment is free, but facts are sacred, and we would like to stick to the facts on this show. But Goodson, you'd like to respond to the contributions that were coming through?
Well, it's very clear that a lot of the listeners want to use SADC. When it's convenient, they want to say SADC must support a regime change agenda. When it's convenient. And when SADC says no, it has nothing to do with us There are elections that have been held, and if you have a problem, go and talk to the electoral bodies. They take them to court and give you evidence of any malpractices that are there. They don't like that, and they don't like SADC. So I suspect some of your listeners are some of those people who are not happy with SADC because SADC is not bought into the regime change. But the truth of the matter is this. You can't run away from the fact that sanctions have a lot to do with how badly our country is doing economically. We are about the only country in Africa that doesn't receive balance of payment supports from the IMF and the World Bank. There are countries that owe IMF and World Bank much more, 3 times more what we owe ourselves, but they are still getting further assistance. We've been taken out of AGOA. We are not allowed to import goods into America because the Americans say that we are not supporting property rights in Zimbabwe. And the party that is celebrating that, the party that is publicly said they support sanctions against Zimbabwe, is the opposition. So it is important for every Zimbabwean to understand.
Goodson, be that as it may, we have the sanctions, and sanctions are a reality in Zimbabwe, and the country has been reeling from those sanctions, as you've rightfully stated. What do you make of the callers who are saying, tiri muma sanctions imomo, nyika ino ine zvinobatika zvakawanda? How have we managed to change the economic trajectory of the country with the natural resources that Zimbabwe is endowed with? These are sentiments that have been echoed by our leaders. Regardless of my sanctions, iwayo Zimbabwe ichabudirira tichakwanisa kudai. What do you make of that? Tirikuda zvinobatika given what we have as a country.
Well, this revolutionary leadership in this country fixed up the issue of fuel. That was a problem in this country. They fixed up the issue of cash. That was a problem. And for the first time, we no longer have, it's no longer, everybody has US dollars in their pockets. They can go to South Africa for the holiday. And that was not possible a couple of years ago. The economy is doing much better than it has ever been. In 35 years of the previous regime and 5 years of this government, there's been major infrastructure development, unprecedented I've seen. Roads have been fixed up, buildings are going up. If you go in the roads anywhere, you are seeing Zimbabweans building houses for themselves when they couldn't afford to do that a couple of years ago. Now, we could do more if there were no sanctions. We could do more. And unfortunately for us, we have Zimbabweans who are working with foreign governments to make sure that more sanctions are put on our own country. That is why we can't run away from sanctions, and that is why we can talk. We are not saying we are going to kill all people who support sanctions here, but we are simply saying that it is a factor and it's not a good thing.
All right, Lazarus, you'd like to come in?
Okay, so Linda, Zimbabwe and the other southern African countries are blessed with the natural resources. But what we are lacking is the technology transfer mechanisms to produce those natural resources from raw to finished products. And I think it is one of the most disturbing thing in this region. And if you check, we can safely say and we can agree that most, if not all countries in Southern Africa are suffering from the paradox of endowment. We have natural resources, but people are not benefiting enough from them, as some scholars have raised. Then we are also suffering from the Dutch disease. The discovery of natural resources is forcing people to chikorokoza at the expense of developing the primary industries, agriculture, health, and education. So when it comes to issues of collective security, the mandate of SADC, of course, there is a regional bloc. When it comes to issues of value addition, when it comes to issues of solving problems that are affecting most people, what we really need is to join hands, to join forces. Our leaders should join hands. They should work work with other development partners to deal with such problems. I can give a good reference of Mashinga Ezegomo's book, A Fine Madness. How can you say we are sovereign when we have natural resources that are not benefiting our people? How can you say we are sovereign, we are independent when people are still living in abject poverty? So what we really need as SADC citizens, or what we really need in Southern Africa, is the stimulation of economic growth, growth that will benefit all the citizens in the region.
All right, and we are 8 minutes away from the news. Abigail, as far as regional peace is concerned, can you provide some examples where SADC intervention has successfully transformed or ensured the end to conflict and prevented recurring conflicts?
Well, it is not the first time to get us into DRC. We know very well that it is not the first time that SADC has acted. And right now, of course, like I mentioned, we have seen at one point SADC coming in here in Zimbabwe at the height of some political misunderstandings, if I may put it right. So then with the First Republic and the then opposition leader, SADC came in and facilitated some processes that led to some GN here. It was SADC. And right now we are sitting on the deployment of SADC mission in DRC. And the Cabo Delgado, we have seen some talks that have been happening, and of course, we have got limits within sovereign boundaries. But we have seen a lot of diplomatic efforts that have always taken place across and among members of SADC. And to this day, I can tell you why we are actually enjoying the peace that we have to date is because of this, of course, outstanding regional body efforts for us to go forward. We are not spared of challenges, but it's interesting to note that even to this day, as we are sitting here, efforts are underway to respond promptly to challenges that will be actually bedeviling our region.
And in 2011, of course, SADC brokered a power sharing agreement in Madagascar. To what extent did that go in transforming that country? I don't know, Goodson or yourself, Abigail, but as far as the effectiveness of SADC in its mediation success stories is. But before that, let me take my last round of callers on 0772162651, 0714-414-413. Star FM, good evening. Star FM, hello?
Hello.
Yes, are you through to the program? Go ahead with your contribution.
Linda, inini ma ndekudaidziso paya panonzi vanhu vakuisa mapepa ekuti vavhoterwe maopposition machiipa mapresidential election paya munhu ngaatanga aenda kuschool of ideology kuchitepo woziva history yeSADC yose kuti yakamira sei tisase maopposition vatengesi.
Aiwa, tinoda kutenda chaizvo necontribution yenyu.
Vatanga vapasa kuschool of ideology vazive history yedu yeSADC kuti nyika idzi dzakaindependence sei. Handitika then wozoisa mapepa yake ekuda kuenda kustate. Kwete kungoita hungry for state house musingazive history dzenyika yemuSADC yese. Muchitengesera nyika.
Aiwa, tinotenda chaizvo necontribution yenyu yemauya nayo. Tifunga takaona mumwedzi yapfuura iyo meya weguta reHarare anobva iye kuopposition vachinge vachiendawo kuchitepo school of ideology kwezvizuva zvakati vakauya pachirongwa tikavabvunza nezveexperience iyoyo vakatitaurira. Asi ndoda kutora mwe muteereri. Star FM, hello? Tiri pedu makadiwa. Ndanchikumbirawo mutaurise, muri kunzwika kure kure.
Tinotenda. Chekutanga ndechekuti tirikuda kunyanya kutaura zvinhu zvedu nechirungu. Vanhu vazhinji vari kuda kuvhoterwa nekuda kuvhota mwacho ngatishandise mutauro wechishona. Ndopanotangira kuti masanctions mune makutanga kutonyepa ipapo. Chechipiri ndechekuti tasei nyika dzakaita sana Botswana nedzimwe dzese dzechirungu vanoshandisa, even president wacho anenge achitotaura achiadresa vanhu vake nechishona nechikaranga chatinonzwa munhu wese, right? Iyi nyaya yemasanctions iyi taneta nayo. Masanctions aya ari kuti aripo ndeapi, ndiananawo, nokuti right now nyika yedu iri kufamba zvakanaka, hatina problem, asi dambudziko nderekuti corruption.
Aiwa, tinotenda chaizvo. Ndoda kukutendai nekuti tasvika panguva yekuti tichipeta chirongwa chedu. Ndichikumbira vadare vedu kuti vange vachipindura. Zvinoti saka wotaura chirungu, Zimbabwe constitution ine 16 official languages kusanganisira chirungu ichocho. Patinoti friend to all, enemy to none, vese havangodzwe chikaranga chamuri kutaura ichi. Saka chirungu chichatoti chitaurwe nekuti ndo chinenge chichita kuti nyika dzacho dzikwanise kudyidzana. Mitauro dzakasiyana, asi tinotenda chaizvo nepfungwa dzenyu. Tichipeta chirongwa, I'll start with you, Lazarus, responding to, and as we end the show, I was going to ask nyaya SADC mission in the DRC, which is set to expire sekutaura kwetamboita, and kuti what do you expect or think the regional leaders will do to bring peace and security in the DRC? I'll ask Abigail to respond to that. But your parting words, Tichipeta Chirongwa, you've heard the views, dzirikubva kuvateereri, tinayo SADC. What needs to be done moving forward by our leaders to improve the lives and livelihoods, ensure true regional integration, economic development, trade and everything?
I think what is really needed is the deepening of democratic culture and democratic institutions in Southern Africa. You once asked about the issue of preventive diplomacy and its structures in Southern Africa. You realize that we have a panel of elders, and that panel of elders assisted Madagascar when it was facing its political crisis. And what we need now going forward is to invest in institutions of governance, is to deepen our democratic institutions, is to add value to our natural resources and lift the lives of ordinary citizens from abject poverty.
All right, and Goodson, your parting shot?
Well, I think that we must learn to ask our politicians to emphasize that we must have democracy in this country. If the election results don't favor you, don't say I won't recognize them if we are not the winners. It's important for you to accept that there are winners and losers in every election, and if you have any evidence of any malpractices, you go to court. Now, we can't have a situation whereby Zimbabweans are going around the world saying the elections were rigged in Zimbabwe or in that country, but they don't go to court with any evidence, but they are bad-mouthing the country and other people outside. That is why there is polarization of people in this country, of their politics. And also, it is very important for people to understand, to learn to accept the history of how the state of Zimbabwe was created. It's very important.
All right.
The state of Zimbabwe was...
I'm going to have to cut you short as this with just your concluding remarks. Abigail, your parting shorts.
Thank you so very much. As I part my expectations, looking at the DRC itself right now, I am looking forward to see objective review of the mission that was in DRC, and possibly an extension, and probably to draw new terms of reference to amplify and make sure that should there be an extension of the term, we must be able to have total results, because displacements are still there. We still see elements that led us to put the very same mission even to this day. So I'm looking forward for this summit to amplify the deployments in the DRC.
All right, and this is the discussion we were having on the show tonight as we were zooming in on the SADC Extraordinary Summit of Heads of State and Government that is currently underway in Harare. And of course, it was prompted by the situation in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo and the post-election tensions in Mozambique. And President Emmerson Mnangagwa, who is the current chair of SADC, will, of course, chair the summit and receive update reports as far as the progress of the SADC mission in the DRC is concerned, as well as Mozambique. But thank you very much to my guests, Goodson Guni, Abigail Mpambi, and Lazarus Sauti. Dr. Abigail Mpambi, by the way. I am Linda Muriro. Until next time, it is goodbye for now.
You've been listening to Muriro on Monday. Join us again next time on Star FM.